Hi, this is a video response, so it's kind of informal. Just let's have a conversation about some stuff. On Ivan Mike 1968's channel and on the Roleplay Cafe channel, I've received some, invitations to have a discussion about an experience of play, not the experience of play, but an experience of play. And so I'm happy to get involved in that discussion if I can. So this is my video response to Ivan Mike and to Jason Graham, and we'll see where it goes from here. So we've recently started a playlist which may or may not be visible at the time of this recording, but if not, check back later and or subscribe to the channel and be notified when it goes live, that kind of thing. But we have been playing the 6th edition of Call of Cthulhu. And one of the reasons why I leapt at the chance to run this, even though I was preparing to run The Rivers of London, was to provide for Ivan, this was going to be a solo game at that time, to provide for Ivan an experience that I had when I started playing Call of Cthulhu, and that I had replicated with other RPG friends down through the decades since then. And what that experience was having a direct comparison between games which invite you or require you, or cultures of play which expect you or are kind of enhanced by rolling a lot. All right, so if you want to know if the character does something successfully or not, you roll. There's nothing in the game itself, or there's very little, or there's nothing in the culture of play itself which encourages you to just let it go, just let it ride. Yeah, you're skilled enough to do that. Now, of course, lots of people have experiences where they've had exactly that experience. The game master has, assessed the situation, and rather than engaging the system, they say, you know what, you're good enough, you can just do that. We've all had that experience. But a game like BRP has built that in from the very beginning. And if you're a long-time follower of the channel, we've talked a lot about this before. That's probably the single smallest section of the rules, yet having the largest effect, and which is probably the most often ignored or never noticed, which leads to lots of unnecessary problems in play. It has even led to the creation of entire game lines to solve a problem which doesn't exist. So I wanted Ivan to be able to have that experience, which is very similar to our play of Ubiquity, where you can take the average. Now, it's done a little differently, but in BRP, under normal circumstances, like you'll find in many games now, under normal circumstances, without stress or trauma, or without the loss or the lack of the required equipment, that kind of stuff, if you are skilled in the thing, you can do the thing. So what does that really mean? It means you don't end up rolling very much during most of the investigation. Now, when you come into an office or that sort of thing, do you need to roll spot hidden? No. You tell us where the investigator is looking. Tell us, that they're opening drawers and they're looking in the drawers, and you're describing what they find, and you're describing the context of what they're finding. You're not trying to obfuscate and be difficult about what it is that they've found. You're trying to inform them what that character, with those abilities and those attributes and characteristics, understands about this thing that they found in this place and in this time. The character and the player connect and the player begins to get a picture of what's going on and what they've found and how those pieces fit together. They don't have to guess why a particular clue was presented. Now, sometimes what it is possible to do in a situation, such as trying to find something that was deliberately hidden, or find something in a place that you wouldn't normally look, that kind of thing, requires some kind of roll. And then, of course, you make the roll. And sometimes that particular situation is especially challenging, and so you make that roll with some kind of modification. Normal game stuff. But a horror game, a game like Call of Cthulhu, includes kind of a shared responsibility between those who are playing it and those who are being the keeper of arcane lore to achieve a certain kind of atmosphere, to allow the mood in the room, to allow the experience of play to facilitate some kind of strongly imagined emotional response. Maybe even some kind of bleed through. The fear that the character is logically experiencing might be able to empathetically, be experienced by the player. Or there could be a transmutation of the emotion that they're feeling as they're risking their character in a particular situation, or as they're fearing what is going to be described next, or as they're anticipating some kind of reveal or some kind of new clue or some kind of new challenge. They can sublimate that emotional response into, an analog of whatever it is that the character might be feeling. And we can get a strong connection. We can get a strong result, a feeling of an experience, some connection to play. But in those moments of atmosphere, in those moments of emotion, in those moments of empathetic connection, when horror arises and the mechanisms connected to Call of Cthulhu, such as the sanity roll, are invoked, they're happening right in the middle of all of that. And that can be quite disruptive. You're riding this wave of imagination or this wave of feeling or this, this empathetic understanding, however it is that you approach play. And we'll talk about this stuff in other videos, but you're riding that wave up and then suddenly there's a need for a roll. Now, if you play the game long enough, or games like it long enough, you can, of course, build up a resistance to what this switch requires of you. We have something called switching costs. As we try to move from one activity to another activity, or as we are multitasking between two similar activities, we can find that our capacity to do them both well is diminished. And the constant switching back and forth between these things that we're paying attention to can start to build up a mental fatigue or an emotional fatigue in us. It becomes stressful after a while. And if you ever worked in a fast-paced restaurant or a call center or something like that, taught young children in a classroom where you're constantly moving your attention around, you can know what I'm talking about in terms of this fatigue and the cost of switching your attention back and forth. You can, like I said, build up a sort of resistance to this. But that, I find, takes intention. There has to be a strong desire to want to play the game. There has to be a strong desire to want to play the game in a particular way, that of being open to and able to experience this and be able to connect to that imagined situation and to be able to draw out or translate that emotional response, that empathetic understanding, right? That logical conclusion, whatever it is. For some of us, it can be after a while at least, easy to make that switch, which doesn't mean that it's ever desirable. And one of the things that BRP allows you to do, because there is a de-emphasis of the need to roll, when you do roll, you notice it more. And when rolling in moments where we want to enjoy that horror atmosphere and then a roll comes, that can magnify that sense of disturbance. This is the same disturbance that comes when we're imagining exploring some kind of subterranean passageway, like, in a game like Palladium Fantasy, right? Where we are, desperate adventurers who are seeking treasure and hoping to get in and get out alive. And then the game master says, roll initiative, right? Now that's exciting. We're going to engage the mechanics. We're going to be fighting for our lives. We're going to be enjoying the kind of gambling risk and reward kind of things. A whole bunch of stuff to be excited about when you hear roll for initiative. But for some people around the table, rolling for initiative, that call to roll for initiative, means the dissipation of their ability to clearly imagine, right? They were caught up in the imagination of what everything looked like and smelled like. They were able to almost be there, right? An immersion in place and time, an immersion in the world. And that's gone. Replaced by using the mechanisms of play, right? The immersion in the situation is swept aside, and the engagement with the mechanisms of play begins. And it can be as powerful a connection. If you're lucky, you can move from the tightly connected, immersive, imaginative experience into that tightly connected flow state of using the mechanics and listening to all the details and making your decisions and sharing your decisions and rolling your dice. And the rolling of the dice can become a physical analog for action. I rolled a hit and I roll for damage, and is still connecting with you in a vital and experiential way, if you're lucky. But for some of us, only the capacity for imagining the imagined situation, the fantasy world, right, gives us that strong connection. And the use of the mechanisms of play are a process, a conscious process, which never elevates to that flow state. It never elevates to that engagement that feels like immersion. Right? It's work. We tend, in that situation, to want to have more of what feels more immersive than what feels more like work. And of course, the reverse is totally true. You may even yourself have played with people who get more out of interacting with the system, right? They get more joy out of interacting with the system than they do about the other stuff, right? Those who are lucky are somewhere in between. So, when we talk about disruption in play, we can't, unfortunately, pin it down to this is always disruptive, right? Or maybe we can, but we're going to find people for whom that disruption doesn't matter at all, or maybe isn't even a disruption. And we are going to find people who are willing to ask for what they want, who are willing to work toward improving their experience of play, who are willing to seek out different games that maybe feel better, or create their own games that seem to answer what it is that they're looking for. But we're also going to meet people who just quit. That last one bothers me. So one of the reasons why we have this channel, one of the reasons why the videos are created the way that they are, and why we talk about the things we talk about, is to build a culture of play among players, of understanding what it is that you do that works, and understanding what you do that maybe doesn't work, and or could work for you a little bit better. And recognize tensions in the game group that might mean that one of those players is going to leave the hobby, or one of those players is, just going along with things silently when they could be getting more out of things. We can find that sweet spot of play for everybody, or we can recognize that we don't have one and we need to do something different in our group. Either this part of the group recruits some new players and we play on a different night, and this part of the group recruits some new players and we play on that night, or whatever. But my video response about the disruption of things, well, I guess I've reached the end. This kind of disruption is real, pretty much in whatever game it is that you're trying to play. There will be some aspect of it which is asking you to do something, maybe, that doesn't satisfy what you're looking for from the game. And that, I find, tends to come up more often with games that have a strong genre element, right? Such as a very cinematic game where we're expected to be, over the top, wire kung fu kind of action, or, horror. And whether that's personal or external. I think we can look for these things. I think we can prepare ourselves for these things. And I think that we can find ways to prepare ourselves for them, or come up with solutions that obviate them entirely if need be. But anyway, this is my contribution to the conversation. Who's next?